There is a nut that Christmas literally cannot survive without, and most people can't even name it. There's another nut that used to be so rare and so expensive that finding one inside your Christmas stocking was considered a bigger gift than the toy sitting next to it. And there's a nut sitting in your grandmother's fruitcake right now that people have been fighting wars over. Actual wars over a nut the size of your thumbnail. Today we're cracking open, pun absolutely intended, every single nut that shows up in Christmas cooking. Where it came from, why it became the Christmas nut, and the one mistake almost everyone makes when they use it. Stick around, because number 4 on this list is the reason fruitcake exists at all, and you're going to want to know that before you insult fruitcake ever again. Let's go.
The chestnut. Let's start with the nut that basically owns the entire holiday season in song form. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire? Everybody sung it. Almost nobody's actually done it. Here's the twist. Chestnuts aren't even in the same family as almonds, walnuts, or pecans. Botanically, they're closer to acorns. They're low in fat, high in starch, which is exactly why they taste more like a potato than a nut when you roast them. And there's a reason they became the Christmas nut in Europe specifically. Before sugar was cheap, before ovens were common in every home, chestnut trees covered entire mountainsides in Italy, France, and Spain. For centuries, poor rural families survived winter on chestnut flour. It was bread, porridge, even pasta. So when December rolled around, roasting chestnuts over an open fire wasn't a cozy aesthetic. It was literally what was available. The mistake almost everyone makes? Not scoring the shell before roasting. Skip that cut, and a chestnut will explode in your oven like a tiny holiday firework. Ask me how I know.
The almond. Now here's a nut that snuck into Christmas through the back door, through marzipan. Almonds trace back over 4,000 years to the Middle East and Central Asia, and they traveled along trade routes into Europe centuries before chestnuts were even a European staple. But almonds had a problem. They were expensive. Sugar was expensive too, so when you combined ground almonds with sugar to make marzipan, you were basically making an edible flex. Rich European families in the Middle Ages started shaping marzipan into fruits, animals, even tiny nativity scenes for the table, because showing your guests you could afford both almonds and sugar was the medieval version of posting a luxury vacation. That's also why almonds ended up baked whole into cakes across Europe. The king cake in France, the Dutch banketstoff, stolen in Germany. A single almond hidden inside became a tradition of its own. Whoever found it got good luck for the year. Or, in some households, had to buy next year's cake.
The walnut. Walnuts have the darkest backstory on this list, and I mean that almost literally. The shell will stain your hands brown in about 4 seconds if you're not careful. Walnuts became tied to Christmas mostly through Eastern and Central Europe, where walnut trees were common and the nut was seen as a symbol of fertility and prosperity. In Slavic and Eastern European households, whole walnuts were often placed under the Christmas tablecloth or hung on the tree itself, the idea being that a healthy walnut kernel predicted a healthy year ahead. Families would even crack one open at the table as a fortune-telling ritual. They also became essential to holiday baking because of texture, not just flavor. Walnuts have a slightly bitter, almost tannic edge compared to other nuts, which is exactly why they balance out extremely sweet desserts like baklava, banana bread, and those dense, syrup-soaked Christmas cookies you find across Greece and the Balkans.
The pecan. Here's where it gets American, because the pecan is the only major Christmas nut that's actually native to North America, not Europe or Asia. Indigenous peoples across the Mississippi River Valley were harvesting and trading pecans long before European settlers arrived. The word pecan itself comes from an Algonquin word, roughly meaning a nut requiring a stone to crack. Once European settlers adopted the pecan, it became the backbone of Southern holiday baking. And this is the nut behind pecan pie, one of the single most iconic Christmas and
one of the single most iconic Christmas and Thanksgiving desserts in America. Now, here's the twist nobody expects. Pecan pie as we know it, that gooey, corn syrup-loaded version, is actually a fairly modern invention. It didn't become widespread until Caro corn syrup marketed it as a recipe in the early 1900s. So the classic old-fashioned Christmas pecan pie you think of, it's not old-fashioned at all. It's basically a 20th century advertising campaign that worked so well, it became tradition. The hazelnut. Hazelnuts are the quiet MVP of Christmas dessert tables because of one word: praline. European hazelnuts, especially from regions like Piedmont in Italy, are considered some of the finest in the world, which is exactly why Italy became the birthplace of gianduja, the hazelnut chocolate paste that eventually inspired Nutella. During Christmas, hazelnuts show up roasted, candied, and ground into flour for torte and cookies across Austria, Germany, and Italy. There's also a folk tradition tied to hazelnuts specifically. In parts of Central Europe, hazelnut shells were once used in fortune-telling games around the fire during the 12 days of Christmas, with the way a nut cracked or burned supposedly predicting your love life for the coming year, which honestly sounds more entertaining than most modern Christmas games. The Brazil nut. Quick one, but a good one. The Brazil nut is the reason your Christmas mixed nut bowl exists at all. Because Brazil nuts only grow wild in the Amazon rainforest, they genuinely cannot be commercially farmed the same way. They were historically one of the rarest, most exotic nuts a European or North American household could get their hands on. Getting an exotic, imported nut for the holidays was a status symbol, similar to getting an orange in your stocking. That's exactly why Brazil nuts became a staple of holiday mixed nut bowls. They were the fancy one everyone reached for first. The pine nut. There's one Christmas nut that isn't technically a nut at all. It's a seed. The pine nut. Pine nuts come from the cones of specific pine tree species, and harvesting them is brutal. It can take up to 18 months for a single pine cone to mature, and workers still have to hand collect and hand shell most of them, which is exactly why pine nuts are one of the most expensive nuts in the world, sometimes pricier than cashews or even some cuts of meat. In Italy, pine nuts became tied to Christmas through panforte and Sicilian-style pignoli cookies, dense, chewy cookies rolled entirely in pine nuts before baking. And in parts of Mexico, piñones show up in holiday ponche navideño, the warm fruit punch served at Christmas posadas. Same nut, two completely different countries, two completely different Christmas traditions. So, next time someone hands you a slice of fruitcake, or a spoonful of pecan pie, or a marzipan fruit that's honestly too pretty to eat, remember, you're not just eating dessert. You're eating centuries of trade routes, folklore, fortune-telling, and one extremely successful corn syrup ad campaign. Every single nut on this table earned its spot at Christmas the hard way. If you learned at least one thing you didn't know before this video, hit subscribe.